Hi everyone, welcome to this week's lecture. And today will be slightly a shorter video because um, I'm only going through one of the examples, one of the example essays um, in the chapter on proposing a solution, right? So that won't take too long. But before I start, I have a couple of announcements. Um, Grades will be in. I'm still grading, and I'll be grading in the next few days. And so I'm aiming um, to grade everyone's first paper by Sunday, right? So I'll be sending them out to you as I grade them. So some of you might receive your papers with comments and grade tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? So um, hopefully I'll get everyone's grade in by Sunday, right? So um, the point really is, for you to be able to use my comments for your next paper, which is not due for another couple of weeks. So we have plenty of time. Yeah, and then so that's for grading, and then Sunday. Um, as you know, it's Sunday the 14th, February 14th, Valentine's Day, if you care about that kind of stuff. Um, your possible thesis for essay 2 is due, right? So obviously that's your assignment for this week. Um, and you can change that, as you go. You're not committed to your proposed thesis. Um, yeah, so that's due on Sunday. And then what else? Yeah, so we have a couple of Zoom meetings left, 2 or 3, I think, or 3 or 4 maybe. So try to, if you want to get the participation points, I'm seeing a lot of, the same people in the Friday meetings, right? And that's perfectly fine. I enjoy their company, and please, feel free to come back every week, even if you already satisfied the requirement. Um, but those who have not been in any of the Zoom meetings, I urge you to join us on Friday. Um, Even if you don't have real questions, right? That's fine. You can just show up and listen, right? Um, all right. So today's readings, they're they're excerpts, right, from larger books. One is from They Say, I Say. That's the introduction chapter. And the other is on paragraphs, right? And the reason why I included these readings is really about just a matter of style, right? Because it's one thing that you see samples, right, of um, samples of these essays, right? But or it's one thing for me to to talk about paragraphs and structure, right? But these additional readings really kind of dig deeper into how paragraphs work, right? Like what are the purposes of paragraphing, right? Or in terms of argument, right? Like what is the point of an argument, right? Or um, when do we enter, like how do we enter, right, into an argument. So I think they're just kind of helpful additional resources um, as you write your papers, right? So I won't talk much about them, but read them and try to use their suggestions, right, in your papers, because these are also um, for example, right? Um, they say, I say. So They Say, I Say is a larger book, right? So this is just the introduction chapter. And They Say, I Say is a book about, um, well, as the title kind of explains, right? They say, I say, right? So it's about how to enter into a conversation, how to enter into an argument, how to enter into a critical debate, right? So, which is to say that, you know, they say, some people say this, right? And then I say this. So that is your point of argument is always sort of drawn from what others have already said, right? So they say, I say, right? So that's the kind of idea of this book. And if you are, you know, if you're an English major, if you're a humanities, some kind of humanities major, sociology, anthropology, you know, psychology, whatever sort of subject you're in, where you will be asked to write, you know, argumentative papers, or, you know, any kind of, you know, papers really, I encourage you to read this whole book. It's not very long. I think it's like 100 pages or 120 pages, right? And it's kind of the thing that we all, you know, especially in the English department, we sort of has been indoctrinated into us, right? That this is how, you know, arguments work, right? And this is how we sort of enter into arguments, right? So this is kind of a, you know, a very helpful, I think, book. If you know, it teaches you how to enter into an argument, but it also teaches you style, right? Like what kind of style do you use in certain kinds of arguments, right? If you're engaging with this group of people or this group of people, right? Or, you know, because yeah, like rhetorical styles, right, sort of differ depending on your audience, right? So this book is also good in kind of like breaking down, right, like how people have successfully argued something for a specific audience, right? So yeah, like it's hard for me to explain what this whole book does, but I think it's very useful in terms of, you know, developing your style in argument, right? It's not just good to like know, you know, like the 5 paragraph argument, right? Like I think it's helpful to have your own style, to have your own kind of distinct approach, right? Depending on, you know, what your topic is, depending on who you're trying to reach out, right? So I highly uh, you know, encourage you to read this book, or, you know, at least start with this chapter, um, but read the whole book, right? If you're interested in kind of, you know, learning different styles in argument. All right, and the other reading, and also in They Say, I Say, there are um, some examples here, right? That you can also use, right? Kind of like sentences, right? Uh, what are they called? Kind of like frameworks, right? Kind of formulas, sentence formula, right? And I'm looking at page 8, page 9, um, where you have kind of frameworks here on how kind of like arguments work, right? So feel free to use these examples, and feel free to, you know, fill in the blanks here, like copy the whole thing and then just fill the blanks with your own arguments, right? That's what they're there for. So yeah, I think that's also very helpful. And there are more templates kind of towards the end on page 22, 23, 24, 25. Um, yeah, so use that for your paper. Right. All right, and in terms of paragraphs, I think this chapter is also very helpful in understanding, right, what paragraphs do, um, and really more than kind of like an argument, more than a way of structuring your arguments, right? It's think of paragraphs as kind of like a visual structure, right? When your reader is looking at your paper, right, and it's just one whole paragraph in a page, right? Like your ideas can get lost, right? So I always say that it's better to have shorter paragraphs than too long or paragraphs that are too long, right? Because visually, right, you're able to, with shorter paragraphs, you're able to uh, break apart your ideas, right? Um, and I think the sample essay "More Testing, More Learning" by Patrick O'Malley is a good example of how he uses very short paragraphs, right, in his paper, because it makes it gives you, right, it gives you a lot of pauses, right, and it gives you time to kind of think where the ideas break and where they continue, and where they break, where they continue, right. So yeah, it's really more of a visual kind of it's I was gonna say visual aid, but visual aid is a different kind of meaning. But yeah, it is a visual aid. It helps you, the reader, right, visually, to kind of it suggests, right, where you should pause, and where sort of like the idea ends, right, and where it begins. So I think that is kind of like the basic um, usefulness, right, of paragraphs. But of course, there are different ways of breaking paragraphs depending on uses, and that's what this chapter, the excerpt on paragraphs, kind of explains to us. All right, so jumping right into the Patrick O'Malley um, sample essay, right? This is on the chapter, or this is in chapter, what chapter number is this? This is chapter 7, right? Chapter 7, proposing a solution. And we're looking at the sample essay, More Testing, More Learning by Patrick O'Malley. Right. So I started talking about this last week, right? In the towards the end of the video last week. And I talked about the introduction, I talked about the thesis and what it's doing, right? Um, so I'll just continue on from there. I talked about paragraphs 1 and 2. So paragraph 3, right? So just to kind of remind us, the thesis here is if professors gave brief exams at frequent intervals, students would be spurred to learn more and worry less. They would study more regularly, perform better on tests, and enhance their cognitive functioning. Right, so the idea is the solution is brief exams, right, at frequent intervals. Right. So okay. So to go back, the problem, right, um, is that a lot of professors, a lot of classes have very long exams, right? Like usually one midterm and then one final exams, right? Um, and that for O'Malley is a problem. And so the solution that he's proposing is multiple exams, like multiple but shorter exams throughout the quarter or throughout the semester, right? Is for him not only helpful for students sort of mentally, right, but it or not only alleviates, right, anxiety, but it also adds to their productivity as students, right? So that's the thesis, right? So moving on to paragraph 3, Ideally, a professor would give an in-class test or quiz after each unit, chapter, or focus of study, depending on the type of class and course material. A physics class might require tests and concepts after every chapter covered, while a history class could necessitate quizzes covering certain time periods or major events. These exams should be given weekly or at least twice monthly whenever possible. They should consist of 2 or 3 essay questions rather than many multiple choice or short answer questions. To preserve class time for lecture discussion, exams should take no more than 15 or 20 minutes. Right. So paragraph 3, what it's doing is kind of jumping right into the solution. Right. Breaking down, what, like, how the solution works, right? And I like that he even broke it down, right, to different subjects, because obviously different subjects have different needs, right? The sciences have different sort of like testing structures. The humanities, we have different testing structures, right? Um, so he's sort of breaking down how the testing would work, right? And breaking down how each subject would take on the solution, and even giving us kind of very exact times, right, on how long these exams should take, which 15 or 20 minutes, right? So I think that is a good way, right, of sort of starting your body paragraphs, right? Because you're making it clear, in detail right away what the solutions are, right? And what the details of the solution are, right? So I think that's very it's very important early on, right? So in the introduction, it's important for you to make clear to us readers what the problem is, right? And then the thesis, you give us a summary of your solution, right? But then in the opening of your body paragraphs, you should kind of expand on that solution and make that, and kind of tell us and make clear to us, right, how your solution is going to work. Right? So I think that is a good example of doing that. All right, so paragraph 4. Here we have the second body paragraph that starts giving us examples and starts giving us um, information from the sources, right? Right, evidence, right? And so I noticed in some of the papers, the body paragraphs, not a lot, but there are some who um, at the top of the paragraph, right, they immediately go into introducing um, their source, right? Like the first sentence of a paragraph would say, according to a research by blah blah blah, and then quote, right? Usually, it's good, in a body paragraph, especially this example on paragraph 4. It's always good to set up, right, your to set up your argument before entering or before including your examples or your sources, right? Or introducing your sources. The idea is that this is your argument, right? And so if you start your paragraph with your source, it takes away from your voice, right? And it prioritizes your source instead of your own argument. This paper is about you and about your argument, right? So you don't want your sources taking away from your own voice, right? So it's always good to kind of frame it first with 1 or 2 sentences before giving us your sources, right? So this is a good example in paragraph 4. The main reason professors should give frequent exams is that when they do, And when they provide feedback to students on how well they're doing, students learn more in the course and perform better on major exams, projects, and papers. It makes sense that in challenging course containing a great deal of materials, students will learn more of it and put it to better use if they have to apply or practice it frequently on exams, which also helps them find out how much they're learning and what they need to go over again. Right. A 2006 study reported in the journal Psychological Science concluded that blah blah blah. Right. So here, notice how there's two sentences, right, that at the top of the paragraph, right, two sentences that are, related to the author's argument, right, before um, before he sort of brings in the sources or the source, right? So that's a good example of how you set up, right? How you set up your source, because you're always sort of connecting it, right? You're connecting your argument to the source, and that the first two sentences that should be sort of like the connection, right? Like how are you connecting your argument to your evidence, to your source, right? So that's one way to do that. All right, so I'm going to jump right into paragraph 8. And if you notice here, paragraph 8 is very short, two sentences, right? And I think that's fine because, yeah, and like notice how like his sentences or his paragraphs here are really short, and I actually prefer this, right? And obviously, feel free to follow the 5 paragraph structure for your paper, but like even this very short paragraphs, it kind of breaks down like in terms of his style, right? It because he has like kind of multiple mini ideas, right, and many parts the solution, so he's also breaking down those ideas and solutions into smaller paragraphs, and so I think it works here. And then if you look at paragraphs for paragraph 8, research supports my proposed solution to the problem I have described. Common sense as well as my experience and that of many of my friends support it. Why then do so few professors give frequent brief exams? Right. So I think this is good because it kind of it switches um, the flow now from the solution to the counter argument, right? So this short sentence, is uh, which ends in a question, right? Sort of um, sort of provides a transition to the counter argument, right? Because obviously, paragraph 9 is now a counter argument, right? So, because like that paragraph 8, he could have just included that in paragraph 9 and it would have been fine, right? But he created a whole new um, paragraph for that, which is fine. It just kind of it creates that barrier, right, between the rest of his argument and the counter argument, right? So I think it worked. Things like that is it's very it's a stylistic choice, right? It's not there's no like right or wrong way to do it. Um, but obviously, you should have some purpose into why you're doing it. But if you're not sure, just follow the regular structure, right? I don't expect you to you're in college obviously because you're trying to learn the basics, right? And then later on in your career, then uh, you can start to play around with with different styles, right? All right. So if I could go back to paragraph 7 here, I'm just going to read the first couple of sentences. By encouraging regular study habits, frequent exams would also decrease anxiety by reducing the procrastination that produces anxiety. Right. So yeah, so I wanted to mention when you're thinking about your solution, right, and you're thinking about your argument, your you're planning an outline, right, it's always good to have at least two or three ideas, right, sort of supporting your solution or your argument, right. So in this paper, he's offering a solution that is beneficial because it adds to the productivity of the student, right, but it also um, it also addresses sort of like mental health issues, right? And it gives us a way to ease, right, and anxiety, like student anxiety, right? So I think those are um, two ways that he is approaching his solution, right? It's good for productivity, but it's good for mental health, right? And it's always good to have those in mind, right? Like, what are the two parts, the two or three kind of aspects of your solution, or the two or three sort of like benefits, right, of your solution, right? And it could be either a physical and mental sort of benefit, right, or it could be an ethical or economic benefit, right, individual or communal benefit, right? And you can just like mix those three together, right? And that because that makes your argument complex, right? If you have multiple ideas going on at the same time, sort of supporting your argument, right? So yeah, so keep that in mind. Um, all right, and then paragraph 9. I will end in paragraph 9. Um, Some believe that such exams take up too much of the limited class time available um, to cover the material in the course. So this is the counter argument now, right? Most courses meet 150 minutes a week, 3 times a week for 50 minutes each time. A 20-minute weekly exam might take 30 minutes to administer, and that is 1/5 of each exam's class time. From the student's perspective, however, this time is well spent. Better learning and greater confidence about the course seem a good trade-off for another 30 minutes of lecture. Moreover, time lost to lecturing or discussion could easily be made up in students' learning on their own through careful, regular study for the weekly exams. Right. So notice here how he actually like he breaks down the class. Right. This is uh, how long classes are, and this is what how long should be spent on lectures, and then this is how long should be spent on exams. Right. So it's that kind of details that is important in your proposal, right? Because that when you become too abstract, then you kind of lose your reader, right? Like what are you actually doing, or what are you actually proposing, right? So it's very important to be as detailed as possible in terms of your solution. How is this going to work, right? And here he's breaking it down into minutes, and how each class time should be allotted, right? And that's the kind of detail, right, that I want to see in your papers. And then paragraph 10. Moreover, professors object to frequent exams because they take too much time to read and grade. In a 20-minute essay exam, a well-prepared student can easily write 2 pages, blah, blah. So this paragraph 10, um, is almost a kind of a plea to the professor, right? Like like this is what you might think, that you are grading too much, right? But actually, like if you do the math, it's kind of the same, and you're giving your students more benefits, right? And so this goes back, right, to the audience. As I mentioned last week, the audience of this paper is not the student, but the professors, right? He's trying, O'Malley here is trying to convince professors, right, to change their way of administering exams, right? And so he's making sure here to address, right, like how it's going to work for the professors and what the professors might think about his proposal, right? And so he's giving solutions to those objections or possible uh, objections, right? So again, um, bringing back, right, the focus to your audience, right? So yeah, so you should always have a sense, right? Some writers have referred to it as a sense of a reader, right? When you write something, you always have a specific audience in mind, right? And yeah, you should always kind of like be aware of to whom you are um, addressing, right, your proposal to. Um, I think that's all I want to um, talk about in this example for now. And if you have any more questions about this, any more questions about they say, I say, or the paragraphs, um, excerpts, feel free to ask those on Friday or email me if you can't make it on Friday. Um, but yeah, I hope to see you on Friday, and the rest I will see you next week.